All right, week 8 forum. We're dealing with chapter 24, Latin America, and chapter 25, kind of the looking ahead type thing. Um, we're only covering two chapters this week because I really wanted to kind of tone it down for the last 2 weeks of the semester. So we kind of bum rushed through a lot of material in those middle weeks. But I think this makes a lot more sense. You got more time to try and think and absorb all this material as we go into the last week of the semester. Latin America is, to me, one of the more interesting chapters because we have a much longer history with those countries, with the countries of Central and Latin America and the Caribbean. And with just about every country, you could look at it and say, well, either it's a British colony or we've screwed them over somehow at some point in the past. And that has a serious set of consequences that flow, from those past interactions. Um, I think that historically we have always perceived our interests in sort of a negative sense in Latin America. We've been more intent on keeping out other regional actors and kind of muting their influence. I don't think we've done nearly as much in terms of trying to invest in opening markets in Latin America. We've just kind of taken it for granted. I think that that should change over time. I think we need to take them more seriously. I think we need to develop over time a more respectful relationship towards them. When you look at the concepts that get thrown around in this chapter, I like three in particular. The whole idea of the caudillo, the strong man on horseback, that has historically been sort of one of the dominant ways of governance in the south of the border nations. Um, and I studied political violence uh, for my master's degree, and caudillismo is one of those things that talk about a lot in a lot of Latin American countries. Sort of this whole idea of strong, charismatic leadership. Uh, the idea of the Bolsa Familia, I really like that idea. Brazil did a lot to eliminate poverty with these kind of conditional cash subsidies that fell under their name of the Bolsa Familia. I think that it reflects this idea that if you invest in human capital, you can reduce poverty. I don't think that that's even controversial, or it shouldn't be. You hear a lot of people just asserting you can't do anything about poverty, and I just think that's wrong. And then I think the good neighbor policy I think is really important. It was a brief interlude, and it came at a particular historical context, right? In World War II, you had, Franklin Roosevelt was concerned, and actually Great Depression into World War II, he was very concerned about growing German, presence and influence in certain Latin American countries, especially in Argentina. And so I think that the good neighbor policy was the correct policy at the time. Let's mute our conflicts. Let's be less impositional on these other countries, and let's treat them as neighbors, not as you know, uh, you know, clients or serfs or whatever you want to call them. In chapter 25, I think it's important to recognize a couple of things. Just how it didn't just suddenly say, here's what we're going to do. World War II is over. Let's do this, this, and this. Uh, there were other options. Roosevelt had a significant, Roosevelt and Churchill really exerted significant influence in terms of trying to develop institutions uh, that would, mute the kind of conflicts that led to World War II. And I think it also reflects the concept in this chapter that really leaps out at me is the whole idea of embedded liberalism. And in that sense, what you're really talking about is liberalism in the international sense, that we're going to build institutions that will attempt to ameliorate conflicts before they happen, before they metastasize into warfare. The idea that if you create venues where grievances can be aired, that politics can be steered in a less confrontational and less violent direction. Um, I think in terms of contemporary challenges, to me, the most important section there is our internal problems with partisanship. I think polarization is a serious threat to national security. I think it's something that has to be dealt with. I think that in some instances, there are political forces at play in the United States that simply have to be defeated. They have to be suppressed. I think there are authoritarian elements in this country that have taken shape and been able to infiltrate the Republican Party, in particular, in ways that are really dangerous. And not to say that the Democratic Party is perfect. I think that there are members of the Democratic Party today that are democratic socialists. I don't agree with democratic socialism, but I don't view Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as anywhere near a threat as people who voted not to certify the 2020 elections. These are people who don't believe in electoral politics if they don't win. That's not a belief in rule of law or democratic values. So that's a serious problem that we have. Also, I would note with Chapter 24, there's a current event going on right now south of the border that's very important, and those are the protests in Cuba. And what you're looking at here is a serious threat to the Cuban Communist Party's control over that island. In the past, the Castros, the charismatic, again, going back to caudillismo, the Castros retained the popularity of the Cuban people. Now you're looking at a Cuban Communist Party that is ruled basically by a functionary that is a stalwart member of the Communist Party, but not particularly charismatic. And so the question is the extent to which the Cuban Communist Party's hold over the Cuban people has retained its vigor. If it hasn't, then there's a real possibility for some kind of political movement to take shape. What role should the United States play in that? I can say this: the more actively we attempt to intervene, the more illegitimate any protest movement would be. So we have to be very circumspect in how we manage those protests and how we manage our response to it. So lots to talk about this week. Again, I've really enjoyed the class. I hope you've enjoyed the class. I know it came by in a blur. I'm going to try to build this out into a 16-week course. I'd welcome any kind of insight and any kind of constructive criticism you have through the student evaluation process, because that would really be helpful to me and Dr. Bath going forward in building this course out. So let's have a great week. Let's participate, and let's get our work done this week.